general trend of, and this is like talking with a train in a train station. I feel I'm gonna have to face it. We are just a part of a bigger trend, I feel, which is that if you have a good amount of UA to invest, you'll be getting an incredible amount of return on investment on what you're doing. And yeah, I'm just going to highlight it today. So firstly, who we are. Oh, maybe I'll just go the entire talk like this. Better? Very rapid. Okay, good. So who we are as a company is 20 geeks in Copenhagen. Most of us have PhDs in machine learning on causal statistics. And we decided to tackle the problem of acquiring and retaining the highest LTV users in a disciplined way. And the way we do it for acquisition is by using PLTV directly to the ad platform. And the way we use it for retention is using what we call contextual multi-armed bandits. And this sounds like a science fiction. Kind of is, but it makes a lot of money for a good number of companies. Today I will be talking exclusively on the first one. So here's an appetizer. This is the first result that I think is sort of an eye-opener, that our clients got a day 60 increase in return of ad spend of 82%. In this case, this was on Meta. But this is the appetizer, so I'd say it's worth listening in if you're in the game. All right, so here are some of our loved customers. Much love for Bernie and Lesmore in this audience. Love these guys. We also service some e-commerce and applications, but we'd say definitely that gaming is the most fun we're having. So that's why I'm here. Well, that and the good weather, obviously. All right, so I suppose if you're in the game of UA, you've noticed that broad targeting is awesome, right? The move towards PMAX, the move towards Advantage Plus on Meta has proved very significant in how those ad platforms work, right? So rather than optimizing and trying to find a useful cohort, you would sort of give up to the ad platform and say, you know what, find those good cohorts, and instead of specifying creatives and assignment, you say, hey, here's a bunch of creatives, and if you're doing performance max, there will be a nice auto adjustment mechanism. And then we can also talk about how unreasonably good that plugin has been for iOS developers in the US for the almost exactly the same reason. You go to broad targeting, you leave a lot of the human bias out of the question, and all of a sudden, you're in a really, really good spot in your performance. Of course, it has a downside. And the downside is that it requires a much higher number of conversions than it used to exit learning phase. And if you're still running UA campaigns where you're exiting learning phase, by now it should be more or less clear to you that you're burning your company's money, so please don't. And of course, some mediators want to lock in also the mediation, as you know, and learning phases could be long on some of those ad platforms. Right? So it's sort of a blessing and a curse, but everything here says you could be making a fair amount of money if you're willing to invest in the beginning a very non-trivial amount. Now, PLTV unfortunately is sort of that concept on steroids. Right? So what is it we do with PLTV in this context? We say that something quite obvious, that not all of your installs are born equal. And not all of those that at day one saw 6-7 ads should be rewarded the same. There are a bunch of signals that are deep in your Firebase logs, that are deep within your user logs, that will tell you something quite meaningful that should be differentiating between each customer. And being able to predict which customers will end up maturing better is a really kind of a secret weapon as you communicate with the ad platform so that they can serve you better. And there's Meta AI here, but the idea here is that you now can play along with those broad targeting mechanisms where rather than just sending, oh, you know what, within 1 day this is what's going to happen, or within 3 days this is what's going to happen, you can say, well, within 90 days, this is what's likely to happen with that user. So, obviously this is not for everyone, right? As we said, rich getting richer, and pretty commonly established here, hyper-casual is not getting richer. So, the idea here is that if most of your revenue is arrived by the time the optimization is done, and in the case of hyper-casual, day 1 and day 7 are correlated extremely well. So there's not a lot to be gained there. So PLTV is not good for hyper-casual. It's also not particularly good if you started segmenting your campaigns a lot, right? So if all you can do on a PLTV signal is running it through 50 campaigns with multiple ad sets, that's not going to work. And the third thing, of course, in the rich getting richer is, and in gaming, of course, it matters less because you guys are good at collecting your data. But if your data warehouse is messed up, or if your refresh rate is daily and not hourly, again, that will cost you. So again, if you were spending a good amount of time figuring out your data warehouse correctly, this is the time to benefit from it. Now, just to kind of put things in a concrete sense, let's go over some technicalities of how something like this works in Meta. So in Meta, there's about 5 options you can use this signal on, and it is a signal because what it is a post-conversion evaluation, right? So you can use it as a custom event optimization. You can use it for value optimization, which most often I have to say doesn't work in Meta, unfortunately. You can use it to build custom audiences, and you can use it using something called bid multipliers. That stuff is awesome, and also, again, in the spirit of rich getting richer, if your ad spend on Meta is way below $300,000-400,000 a month, they probably will not grant you access to this. And if they do, it's the best thing you can do from those 2 days in Barcelona. Call your Meta rep and say, open up bid multipliers for me. The last thing that I will mention is that you can use it also for incremental retargeting, and that's fascinating in its own right. All right, so here are the challenges of using something like this. One, I think she saw you. No, I saw you. Good. The idea here is that you want to have cutoffs of historical users. So what bid multipliers does on a grand scheme of things is to say that there's a bunch of, how many are you familiar with lookalike audiences? Okay, a fair bit. So I suppose you know that the biggest hurdle with lookalikes is that it ends up creating a tiny audience and say, oh, top 10%, give me those, right? So what happens? You end up increasing your cost of acquisition by a fair bit to get something that may be a little better. But here, again, true to the spirit of broad targeting, what bid multipliers allows you to do is imagine like 5 or 6 different lookalike audiences and saying, if you look more like this person, I'm willing to pay the full amount. If you look kind of like those people, I'm willing to pay 80%, and so on until we arrive at trash, right? So being able to figure out how to complement that knowledge, because of obviously everybody who has been more than 90 days on your platform, you have a pretty good idea what's going to happen to them. But at this point, as in all the ad platforms, that data becomes much less interesting. Looking at the last 20 days and giving what is predicted to be the revenue of those people is feeding that mechanism really, really well. And that's why choosing the prediction horizon, how to aggressively set the bid multipliers, all of these are small technicalities that you really want to overcome. All right, so this is what we did for an English company called Hutch Gaming, where the baseline we were competing against was value optimization on the purchase events. And this game is a mid-core, and we ended up creating a value custom audience using PLTV as I just described, and then we set differentiated bids based on ad set level. Basically this type of 0, 20, 70, 100, right? and these are the results for Hutch. So what you just saw here is bid multipliers operating on that game. And I got a mail from the data scientist a couple of weeks ago, and this effect keeps getting amplified. So it actually grows with time, much to no one's surprise, to be fair. Now, moving away from the bits and bytes of Facebook, of course you can say, hey, much easier to win over a system that is currently not performing amazingly well, right? So now you can say, well, can this PLTV signal be working on, a workhorse like TROAS or Google? And the answer is absolutely yes. And here is a gaming company from our hometown, from Copenhagen. We love these guys. And we improved the ROAS of their main prospecting campaign, again using TROAS on Google, where the objective is now not just the purchases or IAA volume, but what is likely to happen with that user in 90 days. And what we saw, and this is pretty cool, you initially buy a shittier inventory. Day one looks not so good, right? And for me, this is almost a good sign, because it means that you're bidding for users that are maybe under-evaluated by everybody else, right? And then you buy them, and in the beginning it looks a little worse, and then by the end of day 30, they end up having a 30%, a 50% better return of ad spend. Return of ad spend, not ever revenue. So we're not playing the game of finding a better audience, and who cares what's going to happen to the CAC, right? You are very interested in making sure that whatever messages you send in the ad platform does not make you this like, oh, I will only buy those snowflake of users. So that's why this thing ends up being widely useful. Let's skip this, even though this is pretty interesting. Maybe the best thing I can say about this case study, which is still ongoing, is that some of our customers end up taking those benefits and moving them into getting just much larger volume on the ad platforms, because they care about the target, not so much the ROAS. So again, true to the state of rich getting richer, this is not cheap. We use deep learning networks, and we're not the only ones. I can name a few number of companies. This is a wave, I think. Let me give them to you for your homework. Voyantis, Pecan, Acetario, these are the ones that I know of. And as a movement, once you start using, in particular, deep learning networks, the part of establishing a pipeline and building a model, these things are going to be heavy computationally. But the process that we've built is now operating in essentially 14 days from the beginning of the process until the campaign starts. And that took us a couple of years. So I'm pretty proud of that one. And I will conclude with a bunch of best practices for you when you go home and think about it. And it is that on Android, we would recommend using Advantage Plus with PLTV custom event optimization and bid multipliers. That is wildly performing. And if you're on iOS and you know that it's not easy, we still found a pretty nice performance boost using custom event optimization. And the last thing I'll say is that on TROAS, we found experimentally that setting back the optimization window from 7 days to 3 days is quite good. And that in order for you to do target CPA, which maybe you shouldn't do on Google, but if you're insisting, you really want to make sure that you're not cutting off an incredible amount of the signal. So if you cut off 33% or less, it starts getting a bit shaky. This has been one of the toughest parts of my life with that train station. All right. Do you guys have any questions? Or are we done for today?
Hey, so my name is Alex, I'm from Scrambly. Just a quick question. Right now we are considering an alternative, and because we would like to get like a long-term prediction of our ROAS, and essentially the app is monetized by ads, and the main problem is that they need a lot of retrospective data. So in order to feed the algorithm to get some prediction on short funnel metrics, deep funnel metrics, and essentially they use like an AI algorithm that does that. And I was just wondering if you could explain, like in 3 simple words, what the whole setup looks like from your side, how long it's going to take, what resources from the technical point of view and from the data injection point of view as well.
All right. So I like the gun. I think they're a nice adversary. There's a couple of things that I want to make very clear on what is the value proposition here and why these things are slightly different. So when you want to do PLTV estimation on your campaign post purchase and not feeding it back to the ad platform, this is a fundamentally different problem. And you get a lot more input space, so you can use 5-7 days to establish it. And you can predict a lot longer and for cohort level. And when you do it this way, you would be minimizing your error there, and that's great. If you would try to use Pecan's solution on this, and some of our previous clients did, some of our clients which were previous clients did, it's a fire. It doesn't work very well. And the reason is, I don't exactly know the reason, but I'd say that we experimentally noticed that these are two very different use cases, and being able to optimize for just being right on the valuation on average of a user is not nearly as interesting as getting something called the ranking right. And that insight is quite meaningful. And in terms of the setup, we do what you call integration by permission. So, do you have a data warehouse? It's a big word. Yeah. So we have an SLA that says that if your engineer is not done in 6 hours, we pay you money. So that's a sort of a commitment from our perspective of how much time it's going to take for you. And the idea here is just to make a privacy-preserving view that we look at. So that means that everything that is PII is hashed, and other than that, log-level detail from Firebase, from whatever system you can have, is used by us for those predictions. The process from our perspective, in terms of from the moment we get access to the data warehouse until we show you the opportunity size, is 5 business days. And again, we have pretty harsh restrictions for ourselves on how much ad questions we're asking. One of the nice benefits, and maybe the difference between us and a lot of the companies, is that we won't have a very explainable model to you, nor do we ask a lot of questions. So the only thing we care about is knowing the revenue events. Other than that, it's up to the deep learning models to figure out if there's a correlation or not. So slightly different products in some sense, but this is a good question. I think I'm stealing people's time now, so thank you guys for your time, and go for that McLaren. So there's QR there.